Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have a very special guest here with me. Gretchen Hernandez is here to tell her divorce, dating, and remarriage story. Gretchen is a business process and mindset coach. She's also a colleague. We belong to a couple of groups together. So it's really, really nice to have you here to tell your story, Gretchen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much.
Please tell the listeners who you are, what you do, and kind of like what it means to be a business process coach.
Okay, so I'm Gretchen Hernandez. I'm the founder of My Freedom Grove. I am a business process and mindset coach. So I help people that are transitioning from being corporate employees or educators into the entrepreneur world, where they either want to be a coach, a healer, or an educator in some way. They want to make an impact on the world, either a social or a healing impact. And I help them transition because there's usually a lot of stress that happened in their previous job that they're still processing. And I help them with all of that. That's some of the mindset stuff. I help put mental health first. So I always take care of them and help if they have extra healing that they need. I help them with that too. And then creating the structure around how do you even put a business together? Because there's so much out in the world where it's just like a little pieces here and there. So I bring all of those pieces together, create the structure, help them come up with their routines, design their products and their services and their business model. So they're actually making a profit because everybody has to keep a roof over their head. But giving them that structure and like the routine and their schedule and how can they do it in a way where they're not jeopardizing their mental health, they're keeping their family all taken care of, themselves taken care of, and providing fantastic value to their clients.
Oh my goodness, that sounds amazing. And when I think back to when I started my coaching business, I'm thinking, where was Gretchen?
Oh, thank you.
Because I left my full-time job right after the George Floyd crisis
Oh gosh,
and all of that racial conversation that was going on.
Mhm.
And it, I left earlier than I think I would have because that happened. I'd always planned that I would leave at some point and go full-time in my business. But then
Mhm.
when that happened, I was like, yeah, I can't handle this. This is not
Yeah.
cool. So I
Mhm.
left. And so all of that stress you were describing and all of that healing, I
Yes.
could have
Yes.
done that because I was healing from all of that. And then
Yeah.
starting a business and all the anxiety and like, oh my God, what is happening that goes into going full-time in a business. So that's fascinating
Exactly.
that you've seen that need in the market and are doing
Mhm.
that. Well done. So needed.
Thank you.
But we're here today to talk about divorce and
Dating.
remarriage and,
Woohoo.
and dating. And I have some notes on your story and I'm like, oh my goodness, where do we even begin? But I really would like to start closer to the beginning for you because
Yeah.
you talked about an early boyfriend that you had and how
Mhm.
your self-esteem got hurt in that
Oh
relationship,
my
that
gosh.
relationship ended, and how you
Yeah.
wanted a dad figure. And I think that plays a lot into the story of who we choose as our
Mhm.
spouses.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So first, I'm on my third marriage and we're in a blended family. We have 5 kids together. We're a rainbow family. So we have lots of LGBT members in our family. And I started off my very first boyfriend. We were together for 5.5 years and we were engaged. And about 6 months before we were going to get married, he tells me that he's bisexual. And I had had lots of clues along the way, like finding a stack of about 30 magazines of naked men with like his address label, but it was going to a PO box. And so when I asked him about it, he said, "Oh, well, one of my fraternity brothers was in one of these magazines. So I wanted to support him. So I got it." And it's like, okay, but a subscription for like
Yeah.
that long. So it's like the clues were all there. He was
Mhm.
my best friend. Like I've always been attracted to flamboyant men. Absolutely love flamboyant men. And I don't know if you ever experienced this, but a lot of my girlfriends growing up, they were also attracted to flamboyant men. And then we'd find out that they were gay. And it's like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, like we want to be with them, but they're gay, right? So here I was, he's telling me that he's bisexual, but I didn't know if I really believed it because our intimate life just wasn't really happening. It was more of like a chore, like he had to grit his teeth for it. And so I just felt so unwanted in the intimate department. Like the love was
Mhm.
there, the best friend part was there, and I wanted to have kids. And I remember like crying in the bathtub one day, thinking, how am I ever going to have kids? He doesn't even want to be intimate with me.
Mhm.
And so as it got closer and closer, I had all of the invitations like all signed and ready to go. And I was like, this just isn't right. I'm like, I think that he really is gay. I think his parents, they were like trying to break us up in their own way, but
Mm.
he didn't really understand it. But his dad had been going to the gay pride parades for, oh gosh, over a decade. And but he didn't think that his parents would accept him on
Mm.
that part of him. So I think they knew and I knew, but he wasn't ready to face it. So I finally told him, I love you, but I don't think this is right for either of us. And
Right.
he was so grateful. He said, I knew you would be the strong one that would be able to do this.
Mm.
But he was still incredibly jealous that I then, like a couple months later, started to date somebody else. So as my best friend would call me, I'm a serial monogamist. So I had developed a friendship with someone at work and I
Mhm.
was attracted to him, but it was just a friendship. But he was the one that was there with me as I was going through this breakup. Like I cried to him, like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can go through with getting married. And he's just like a guy with a heart of gold, like so nice. And so he helped me through all of that. And then I I broke up with my fiance, ended up
Mhm.
moving, and then our friendship started to bloom and then we started to date. Well, my ex-fiance was really not happy about that. So then he got it in his mind that I broke up with him to be with this guy. And
Mm.
it's like, oh, that wasn't the case. But
Yeah. When you think about like what was the difference between when you found the magazines and you were like, oh, something's going on here? And
yeah.
I think you said he told you that he
Hmm.
might be. And then when you finally broke it off, like who were
Yeah.
you at those different, those different
Yeah.
times and how was it different? What was different in your mind when you finally got
Mm.
the courage to break it off? Because I imagine that must have been hard.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I found the magazines, I don't even know if we were engaged yet. We had been dating for maybe 2 years. We were living together, but I had this idea in my head that I was supposed to be married by the time I was 24 and then have kids.
Mm, got
It's like I
it.
had my whole life planned out, right? So I was on track for that. So I didn't want
To mess it up.
I didn't want to mess it up. So uh, so I convinced myself that I was wrong
Isn't
in
that
my thoughts.
fascinating that you were trying to save time?
Yes,
You're like, I'm on track. I need to keep to this time. And then you ended up wasting time because you
I
were in that
did.
relationship for 5 years. It's the
Mhm,
power of how
mhm.
what we're thinking. And if our thinking isn't completely clean, it really doesn't get the results we want.
Yeah, yeah. And so then as it was getting closer, so when he said that he was bisexual, I was like, okay, he's at least admitting that part of it, which he had denied for so long. But when he
Mhm.
told me, I was thinking, I don't know if this is true because I never hear him talking about other women. I mean, that's like the perfect
Mm.
husband, right? Like they're not interested in other women. You're like, all right, I don't have to be jealous. But no, he really wasn't interested in women,
Yeah.
including me. And so as it got closer to that, it just, my self esteem was just at an all time low. I felt like no one was ever going to want me in my life. There were certain things like along the way that he, he grew up in a very affluent neighborhood and he saw me and he told me this at the very beginning as white trash and
Mm.
that he was going to elevate my status. And so that was painful.
So, ladies, that
So
is a red flag.
yeah,
Guys
that
who
is
are
a red
wondering.
flag. And yes, and then he had told me like in the first 6 months that he thought that I was unattractive, but he was going to make me over and turn me into something beautiful. And then
Mm,
he felt like he had accomplished that I was beautiful and that I was high class now. I was also in a ton of debt because he convinced me that at like 20 years old, I deserved to buy clothes at Nordstrom's
mm,
and spend like $120 on a dress that I would wear like, once in 6 months. So I was in so much debt, but I looked great. And that's what I felt towards the end was he just wanted the cardboard cutout of the
mm.
perfect family. But he didn't actually want anything to do with me or if we had kids. He just wanted the picture perfect version of the kids, but didn't actually want the whole family life. And it
Right.
just, I I just couldn't do that to myself. Like I was in so much pain. I already had suffered from depression, like starting at age 19, and this was just adding to it. And it just, that's why it wasn't a good fit for me. But also, I loved him so much. I didn't want him to be trapped in a marriage with someone that he wasn't attracted to either.
Yeah. I mean, you describe it as not being a good fit, but it almost sounds emotionally abusive to me.
Hmm. I never considered it that way. What's interesting was 10 years after we broke up, I was listening to some Overeaters Anonymous podcasts because that's like when I first started even like entering into podcasting areas. And I've always been an overweight person. And so listening to other people's stories, it's like helping me figure out what are the keys? Like, how can I heal? Why am I overeating? And like, how can I, move on? Anyway, a man comes on, he introduces himself, and I'm like, I know that voice. And he starts talking about how he's a gay man and
Mm.
that he had denied himself of his authentic identity for so long. In fact, he was even engaged to a woman. And I was like, that's me. He's telling our story.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and so he's expressing to all of these strangers, and he knows it's going to get recorded and put out into the world. He expressed his regret for using me
Mm,
as a beard. That's what he called me. And so
mm,
he admitted it that he had used me and it hurt. But it
mhm.
also, the next thing he said was the love was always real. And I was like, I
Wow.
felt that too, that the love was always real. So
Yeah.
that felt really good. He called me shortly after. Like, I think I found him. I can't remember because we had not had contact for 10 years. And at that point, I was going through the divorce of the guy that I had, transitioned to immediately. So that 10-year period, I was going through a divorce. Ironically, I had already met my current husband. And so when we talked, I was like, okay, so interesting fun fact. This guy that I'm thinking about dating, he was a model and a playgirl. And he's like, oh, you go, girl. I mean, it was so much fun talking with him, but he was calling me to make amends as part of his 12-step program. And he had gone on and had a whole lot of problems with overeating and drugs and alcohol because he couldn't accept himself. Yet
Mm.
at that moment, I was like, well, you know that your dad always accepted you. And he didn't know that. And so we
Wow.
had this moment of healing because I like shined the light on it of like your dad was going to these pride parades for the longest time, but he was waiting until you were ready. Like all of us knew it, but you weren't ready yet. And all of a sudden it was
Wow.
just like this huge, profound healing. And so I
Wow.
don't think that he was trying to be abusive. I
Hmm.
think that he was just trying to protect himself and
Yeah.
he didn't know. He didn't
Yeah.
know.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. We did not know we were going to go there, but
I
I
know.
know that is going to help so many people listening who
Mhm.
are going through, pieces of that story. All right. So let's tell the dating story.
So the dating story.
Marriage
So
number one, right,
yeah, so
was the
marriage number
coworker.
one was a coworker and he's an amazing man, but yeah, we realized that it also wasn't a good fit. We had some cultural differences. So he was Filipino and I love his family. He's great. Everybody's great. But we have some differences. Some of it is religious differences, but also I was brought up by a single mom who was a carpenter, who was always like, you can go out and do anything. Women could do anything. So I've always been all about the empowerment. And in his family, the men are supposed to stay home with their parents until they get married, and then they move in with their wife.
Mm.
Well, I was already a very independent person. And then he moves in with me, and he had never lived out on his own before. And there were a few other things, like his parents believed that he had to finish college before he could go on and get a job. College was a struggle for him. So it took him 15 years to finish his bachelor's degree. Meanwhile, we were already married. We had a house, and we had 2 small boys. They were infants, and he wasn't working. And I was working with 2 small infants, asking him, please, can you go out and get a job? This is hard on me to fully support us. But his family was supplementing his side of the income so that it was still like financially balanced. But I really had a problem with that, because I grew up like, no, you've got to be on your own 2 feet. You can't allow your parents to support you for your whole life. So it was a cultural difference. But ironically, his sister, she is kind of like me. And so she moved out, went off to college, and she's been a strong, phenomenal woman on her own 2 feet. And it's like, how is it different? But I don't know.
Was that a thing like where that was what the women did and there was a different rule for the men?
I have no idea, because he was actually born in the Philippines. They came over when he was 3, and then his sister was born here. So I don't know if there was that, but he also was not interested in learning about his culture. He was almost embarrassed by it. He was teased a lot as he was growing up. His sister fully embraced it. So much pride in her culture, and I'm so proud of her. And so I think she wanted to go out and make something of her life, because she saw how hard it was for her parents to come over to this country. And then they started sponsoring like one family at a time to come over. So she really wanted to like get established.
Do you think maybe rather than being a cultural thing, it was just like their family dynamic where, within families, there's just certain roles that different people play, and his role just ended up being that one?
It sounds like that could be. But so I started off my career as a microbiologist. So I spent a lot of time in science labs. And out here in California, we have a large Filipino population, and they also like laboratory work. I think that's why I ended up meeting my husband, because we worked in a laboratory. In fact, his mother worked there too. And I knew her before I knew him. And I absolutely loved her. And then here's this good looking guy. And then when I found out that he was her son, I was like, oh, I already like the mother, and she's got a good looking son. Awesome. But as I continued working in more and more labs, I'm talking with more and more Filipino friends, and they're sharing a lot of the cultural things. And that ended up being a common theme. Now, the difference between male and female, that I didn't necessarily see, but there was definitely that commonality that, the men are supposed to stay living with their parents until they go out and live with their family, their wife and their kids.
So did you feel like a parent in that relationship? Was that kind of like the dynamic that you were experiencing?
No, I felt like I had to be the protector though. Okay. So they lived in a rougher neighborhood in Sacramento in California, where he had to experience like drive-by shootings in his neighborhood. Like he even shared with me about a night where he was getting off work. He saw the shooting, I think, and he had to drop and roll underneath his car. Well, at this point in my life, because of the last gentleman I was with, I had this elevated status. So I wanted to live in the fancier neighborhoods. So I didn't know this kind of a life where there was violence in a neighborhood. I didn't have that fear. He had that fear. They even experienced having their Christmas wreath stolen off of their door, and his mom just crying and falling apart that she couldn't even put up Christmas decorations because things would be stolen.
Right.
So he had this fear and I didn't. Like I was fearless because I just hadn't had that experience. So then as we were living together, excuse me, he would try to impose different rules on me, like you can't go out grocery shopping at night, or we're not working at night
Mm,
because it's dangerous, and so much fear. And even like taking out the garbage cans at night.
mm,
It was okay, you stand at the door with these two little babies and watch me to make sure I'm safe taking out the garbage
mm,
cans. And I just couldn't handle it. I was like, why are you scared of everything?
mhm,
And so I always felt like if we were out somewhere and someone was to pull a gun out, he would duck behind me and use me as a shield. Now, I know that's my own thoughts. I know that.
Thankfully, you didn't have to test that.
Thankfully, I didn't have to test it.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to have that protector in my life because I grew up with a single mom. I had a stepdad in my life until I was 14, and he was a protector, but he also did some bad things to me. So it wasn't a total protection when he ends up being the one that hurts me.
Mm,
So I always wanted to have a protector in my life, just, someone that can hold me and hug me and tell me everything was going to be okay and keep me safe. And here I was with this man who was scared of everything. Now, he's a wonderful man. I'm so grateful that he is the father of my sons. And he's even stepped up to be the father of my daughter, too. So we're going to get into that. That's a pretty interesting story. But I really needed that like protection feeling in my life and someone that was willing to be a financial partner with me, too. So we ended up divorcing, and
mhm.
my best friend steps in and she's like, you've got to date 18 men before you decide on the next one. Cause she's like, you're a serial monogamous. Like you went from 5.5 years to like no break to like 10-year relationship. She's like, you got
Mhm.
to get out there and date. And I was
Yeah.
like, who would want me?
Mm,
Because I still was living with those scars of that first relationship. And then with my marriage, I was actually the one that proposed to him. So we had been together for 4 years. And I was like, come on, I've got like this schedule. I was supposed to be married at 24. That didn't happen. We got married when I was 28. I had kids at 29 and 30. Like, come on, we are like
yeah.
behind schedule. So I was the one. And he didn't appreciate that I was the one that had proposed. So he was like, yes, but let me be the one to propose to you officially. So I kind of felt like I had to convince him to marry me.
Mm,
And we had already owned a house together. And it's like 4 years into it. Like, come on.
yeah.
So I had this baggage of thinking that nobody really wanted to be with me. And now I had two small boys, like both of them were under 2 years old. And I'm thinking, who would want me? And my best friend goes, you have to go date 18 guys.
Right.
I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who would want me?
Yeah. So you were divorced. Did you start working on yourself during this period before the second marriage, or did you just do
I
the 18 people experiment?
I think when my first husband and I started to have some issues because we separated for a little bit, um,
Mhm.
for like at the 2 years before we officially separated. We separated for a little while, and I started to do a little bit of the self improvement, like reading a couple of books, and that's when I started reading Don Miguel Ruiz and the Four
Mm,
Agreements.
yeah.
Uh, it's just like at
So
the core
good.
of me. So good. So, yeah. So I separated from my first husband 2005. In 2006, I started a new job. And one of my coworkers, she was like, you seem really stuck.
Mm,
She's like, I think you need to go to the Landmark Forum. And I was like,
mm,
okay, I don't know. What is the Landmark Forum? And she's like, well, it's a 3-day event. It lasts really long, but at the end, you won't be stuck anymore. And I was
mm,
like, okay, well, can you tell me more? I'm like, I don't understand. And she's like, I can't really describe it, but I know that it's going to help you. And I don't know what the signs were outwardly that I was
Mhm.
stuck. But I was definitely going through a whole lot of turmoil at the time. I had moved. I started a new job, going through the
Mm.
divorce. I had started my first dating experience. I think I was 33 at the time, and I was dating a man who was 46, who was also going through a
Mm.
divorce. And there's a whole lot of mess with that one. And so I was now having mind drama about what was happening in that dating relationship. Plus, I was still going
Mm.
through the divorce process. So I
So
was
when
like,
you
okay, yeah,
described yourself as a serial monogamist, you meant I meet someone and then I date them for several years.
yeah, until we get married.
Until we
Mhm.
get married.
Yeah, instead of like testing the waters.
Yes.
But yeah, so I did the landmark form, and it really was eye-opening. And that was, even though I had read the four agreements and I understood that our thoughts create our reality,
Mm-hmm.
what I got out of the landmark forum was that I had been suffering so much in my life because of a lot of my thoughts and my belief systems that I had developed early on. And now I carried it with me, and I was using that as a lens on the rest of the world and making it my reality when it didn't have to be. And so
Wow.
I didn't have to suffer. So it really took me from focusing, I called it like staring at a knothole on a tree, like getting so caught up in the details and ruminating on that for hours and days on end. And by the end of the 3 days, I felt like I could see the whole forest. I was like up above, I could see
Yeah.
all of it. I could see like the big picture of life, and went, whoa, I'm getting wrapped around the axle here
Mm-hmm.
on having to watch my husband take the garbage cans out at night.
Yeah.
And like I would spend days stressing out over that and having all sorts of suffering around that,
So the
as
actual
opposed to like,
experience of watching him take the garbage out was maybe 3 minutes.
yes,
And then you would spend 3 days
or
in your
years
for years.
on that one thing, and making it mean all sorts of stuff about him, about me, about our
Mm.
relationship, when it's really one activity of just taking the cans out to the street.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't
Or
have to
even
mean
seeing the
anything.
choice of, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Good luck. You know,
Yeah, there's that
there's
too.
that. There's so many options in
There's so
between.
exactly. So that's really where the self-development journey started for me, but I didn't really know where to go next after that. I didn't know about the life coaching industry. I didn't know
Mm.
about any of that. But I did know I was still on a mission to be married and have more kids, because I wanted to have 3 kids and I had 2.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I have to date 18 people. So throw into the mix that new job that I started. First day of new hire orientation, I met my current husband.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know how monumental that day was going to be.
Yeah.
And he was not on my radar because, while like I was already dating someone and I was going through the divorce process, I was not paying attention, but I did go up and introduce myself to him that day. I only introduced myself to 2 people out of about 150 that were in the room. What I
Wow.
didn't know was that I had caught his attention. So I tend to sit up in the front of a room and ask a whole lot of questions. He's one of those that sits in the back of the room and he's shy to ask the questions. And
Mm-hmm.
so he watched me and he just thought, she's the most powerful woman in the room. And he was drawn
Hmm.
to that. I'm like, powerful, because I'm asking questions, because I'm like, I want to know when pay periods are. I want to know what the 401k matching is, you know.
Well, he wanted to know all that too. You were just helping him out. He was like, thanks.
But I'm brave enough to talk in front of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he just like, it was true love at first sight for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not like looking for, number 2, 3, 4, 5 in the dating experience yet. I was still dating number 1.
Mm-hmm.
So just totally not paying
Just
attention.
didn't see it. Yeah.
I didn't see
Well,
it.
but it's interesting. You weren't looking, so you didn't see. And I
Yes.
always talk to my clients about this. I'm like, listen, one of the reasons to not be dating someone who isn't good for you is so that you have the space to see who else
Yes.
is in your orbit.
Oh,
And
yeah.
sometimes women don't realize how close their potential partner is, right?
Hmm.
Like you were that close
Yep.
to your husband, the one who was going to work out. You
Uh-huh.
were in the same room, you introduced yourself to him, you had a conversation, he was
Mhm.
smitten,
Oh, yeah.
and you had no idea. Like this
Mm-mm.
is entirely possible, possibly happening to everyone who is single and listening to this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And he's more than my third husband. He's my
Mm,
soulmate.
mm,
He is the one that I was destined to be with. No matter what hardships are thrown our way, he's the one.
yeah, so good.
And I had heard that that existed, but I hadn't ever really felt it because I was just trying to fill the spot of husband.
Right.
I wasn't looking for soulmate.
Yeah, or even that, almost having that bigger vision for your life that would include someone who was able to hold a similar vision or work
Hmm.
with you on a similar vision.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Exactly.
So what happened after? Because you didn't marry him at this point.
No,
You
no,
that
I
was
I didn't even know. Um, so I was all about like the visualizing what life is. So the new guy I'm dating, I have a framed picture of him at my desk. And this became kind of a theme for me. Like whoever I was dating, for like multiple dates, all of a sudden there was a framed picture at the desk. Well, my
mm,
husband, he works security where we worked, and there's like 1,000 people there. I didn't know that he would come by, he'd work nighttime, he'd come and he'd sit in my cubicle and he'd stare at these pictures. And he's like, I want to be the one in the picture with her.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so he'd start leaving me like little post-it note surprises. And I was like, what is going
He
on?
didn't know, you didn't know it was him? Did you know it was him leaving you notes?
Um, it took a while.
Oh
Like
my
it's
goodness.
one of those of when you're not paying attention, it's like, huh? So I remember it like one of the second parts of new hire orientation, there's like 6 of us sitting at a breakout table. And he was talking a lot about his wife and about buying
Mm,
her Gucci bags and all of that. And I'm like, oh, that is so not me. I'm not into purses. I hate purses. Like I have a phone wallet. I'm like,
mm,
I don't want to hold on to anything. So I was like, as far as I knew, this guy's happily married. So
mhm.
we are in the cafeteria one day and he says, hey, I'll buy you lunch. So I was like, oh, okay. Like people do that where I worked, like people would buy each other lunch. So we sat down, we were having lunch, and I'm like, new friend, right? This is great. And we had a couple other people join us, and which I didn't know he was like, go away. And I'm just like an inclusive person. I like to meet new people. So I'm like, yeah, join us. So then the second day rolls around and he buys me lunch again. And at that point, I was like, wait, once is understandable, but second time,
Mhm.
what, huh? And so we sat down again, we're having lunch. And I started to ask like little questions about like his wife and stuff. And so he'd like answer it, but then like kind of like brush it aside and talk about other stuff. And I was like, huh, something's off here, but I don't know. And
Yeah.
so I was not considering him a potential mate or, someone to date, like any of that. I was just like, why would he buy me lunch 2 days in a row?
Mhm.
Because I wasn't used to people doing nice things for me, right? Because I didn't think that I was a desirable person, or
Mhm.
even there's some people in the world that just seem to be treated nicer than other people. And I wasn't
Usually
one of
because they
those.
feel like they deserve it and they're worthy of it.
Yeah.
So,
And I
yeah.
definitely did not feel worthy of any of that. And in fact, I always felt like, no, 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 I have to be the generous one. Like
Mm,
people can't be generous to me, because then it made me feel uncomfortable because like, well, I don't know what to do with this.
yeah.
So he was being generous and I was like, oh, I don't know what this is all about. So yeah, so he sent me an email later on saying, I know that I probably really confused you, but here's the thing. I'm separated from my wife. I'm living separately. And I'm just, he didn't say I'm really into you, but basically that was what he was conveying. And I was like, oh, huh. Okay. So by this time, I had already broken up with the first guy. I'd gone on a couple more dates. So my current husband became number 6 out of the 18 assignment.
Okay.
But we didn't get to go on like a real date. We went to the gym because our employer provided a really nice gym membership that it was an extensive like country club kind of thing. So we went there. I didn't really think anything of it because it just fit into both of our schedules and it was nice hanging out together. So eventually it comes to light that he had lied to me. He wasn't actually separated from his wife. Soul crushing, because I actually felt from him that he desired me. It was like the first person in my whole life who really felt like that. It's like, if you can think of the strongest magnets on the earth and like how tightly they pulled together, that's what I felt like with him, that he desired me that much. And I don't know if it was because of that, that I desired him that much. Like that might have been at the very beginning, but eventually it really became that we both just wanted to be with each other that bad. So then to find out that he had lied to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm being used again. Like, ah. So that was awful. So then I started to date other people. And then his soul was crushed because he's like, no, I want to be with you. So then he got upset when he saw me dating other people. And there were times where I felt like I was cheating on him by dating other people. And it didn't make any sense. It's like,
Right. What do you think that was? You feeling guilty for moving on from someone who clearly wasn't available for a commitment?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I completely have an answer for that one.
And I know that's something that shows up with a lot of my clients who are people pleasers.
Yeah.
They feel responsible for other people's feelings. And so it doesn't matter whether or not what they're doing is in integrity or justified. They feel guilty if anybody feels bad about it. If anyone has feelings of disappointment, if anyone has feelings of loss, even if they're in integrity, they feel bad. And sometimes women will go out of integrity so that they can help other people feel better.
Yes.
That is the quintessential, description of a people pleaser. That the people around you need to be pleased no matter what else is happening.
Oh my gosh. I can definitely see traits of that because I've always felt like I was empathic. Like I can feel other people's emotions, but when someone looks like they're suffering, I feel compelled to help them so they are not suffering. Right. And he had a lot of suffering. It wasn't just in his marriage. He had a lot of other suffering too. And so there were times that he would show up playful with me and I was like, oh, fun. Like I want to hang out with him and have fun. But a lot of the time it was all of his emotional stuff was coming up and it's almost like the Florence Nightingale effect.
Yeah. You are
like,
being the fixer.
I want to heal him. And then it was like, boom, I get pulled right back in. It's like, no. I can't do this. And then, and
that dynamic, I think, keeps women continuously attracting men who need to be fixed or attracting men who need work or men who don't have it together, men who don't have the capacity to take care of you as a woman, or at least to hold up that 50-50 in the relationship.
Oh yeah. And that's where marriage number 2 came in. I fell into that hard. So marriage number 2 was, I think he was maybe like number 17 out of the 18. And I was trying to stay away from my husband because I was like, no, you're married. I don't want to get involved with no. And it was so hard. But I was like, if I'm married, I will not interfere in their marriage.
You won't be tempted to go date this person who isn't available.
Exactly. So I met a man on a dating app and he lived a couple hours away and he had so many red flags. Like when we started
Mm.
talking, like he had a lot of the perfect flags at first. Like he was an EMT, so he would go out and he would be a healer. And I was like, oh yes, I want to be with someone like that. And he was just sharing like all of the ways that he helps people, and like his brother was a firefighter, and I was like, ooh, he comes from a whole family of people that want to be of
Mm.
service and help people. And I was just like, oh,
It
all
was the external, it
romanticized.
was the external checklist, and then your brain built this whole story
Oh yeah.
on that.
And he knew how to like build houses from the ground up. He knew how to fix cars. He was a certified Honda mechanic, and I'm a Honda
Mm.
driver. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It must be
But
a sign.
oh my gosh, but the way he would talk to me, it was like the, oh, come to Papa, put your head right here. I've got you, baby girl. Like everything's going to be okay. And oh my gosh, I just melted. I was like, oh my gosh, like all of my fears, everything, all my insecurities just melt, and I'm safe with him.
Mm.
But then he was telling me about how he used to run with Hell's Angels and all of the laws that he broke and like all these other things. And so all the red flags were going up because I'm like, I've never dated a criminal before. I've never
I love how you
been with
said that.
someone that
I've
was
never
like,
dated a criminal before.
yeah, never dated a criminal. I've never been with someone that would go out and like do physical harm to other people.
Mm.
And I was like, whoa, whoa, like everything is screaming, get away from
Yeah.
this guy. But at the same time, like, but look at all these other good flags over here. Like, this is so great. And he makes me
Yeah.
feel so good.
I'm in
And
situations like that because I have, talked to women who have been like, well, that was his past and things like that. And I'm always
mhm,
like, just look at it from a compatibility point of view.
mhm,
Look, your best partner will be similar to you
mhm.
in overall values. Not that a person who
Yeah.
has committed a crime in the past can't change or is still committing crimes currently. But a good rule of thumb is to look for someone who looks like you. When I say looks, not physical looks, but
Mhm.
in terms of just how they've approached life.
Yeah.
So if you're not coming with a criminal record, you kind of have a right to say no criminal records
Yeah.
and don't have to feel obligated to
Mhm.
entertain that just because you have to give
Mhm.
everyone the benefit of the doubt, which, by the way, it sounds mean, but my clients are not allowed to use the word benefit of the doubt within our dating practice. We practice
Oh,
that with
yeah.
our family, with our children, with people we know. We do not practice it with
Mhm.
strangers on dating apps.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I needed you so bad back then. Yeah. Cause one of the other things that he shared with me was that he was in recovery from
Mm,
narcotics. He was a meth
mm,
addict, but he had been clean for 6 years. So again, it was one of those of, I've never been with someone who used any kind of drugs, but
mhm.
he's been clean for 6 years. So okay,
It
this
must
should
be
be fine.
fine.
Yeah. And then he did what my current husband did, is he really stepped up to the plate where he drove the 2.5 hours to come and
Mm,
spend time with me. And I was like, ooh, someone who is stepping up to the plate and showing me that he sees me as valuable. Well,
mm.
about a month into dating, he injured his back at work. So then the bleeding heart in me is like, oh, come here, Florence Nightingale, come stay
Yeah.
with me. I'll take care of you. Yeah.
So he moved in a
So
month later.
moved in a month later and was like, I'm going to be the father figure to your kids who's like
Mm,
strong and not scared of the world. And I'm going to teach all of the stuff. And my boys were
mm.
4 and 5 at the time. And I was like, oh, this is great. But he also was like, you can't cuddle with them on the couch anymore. And I was like, what? He goes, no, you're coddling them. So I missed out on
Whoa.
years of getting to cuddle with my sons, which just breaks my heart
How
now.
long were you married?
We were together for a total of 4 years and
Wow.
married for almost 3. And so we had a daughter together. And then what I didn't realize was that he went back on meth. And I didn't know
Mm,
because I had never been around someone that was on drugs. So then he had this fear that I was going to leave him, which at the time I had no reason to leave him, but his fear overtook him. So then it turned into a domestic violence situation of a lot of threats of physical violence towards me and my kids if we ever
mm,
considered leaving. And as like a way of trying to keep myself like mentally well. After I
Mhm.
had my daughter, this was before like everything started getting really bad. I was doing these me nights. So Thursday nights for
Mhm.
2 hours, I could go do anything like read a book, just have a iced tea at a coffee shop, whatever, just so that I could come back from work and from everything and refreshed and be there with my family and take care of my infant daughter. What I didn't know was that during that time, he was abusing my sons and threatening
Mm.
them that they could never tell me anything because he thought that they were plotting against him and trying to drive like a wedge between us, and I was going to divorce him.
Mm.
So it took a lot, but I got a restraining order, did all of the things, got him out of the house. It was very, very scary.
Mm.
But the thing was, is that I had married him because I wanted to stay away from my husband. And so I had not seen my husband, my current husband, for 2 years, but
Mm.
I kept thinking about him the whole time and wanting to be with him. In fact, the day that I got married to my second husband, we eloped
Mhm.
because he was definitely like keeping me away from a lot of my family and my friends. We eloped.
Mhm.
And the day that we did, I kept staring in the mirror of the car, waiting for my current husband to show up because I told him where we were going to go get married. And I was
Mhm.
hoping he was going to come and, like ride up on the horse and save the day and sweep me away.
Yeah.
But he wasn't ready to get divorced because he didn't want to break up his family and his daughter, like the whole relationship. But I had been hoping and hoping. And so
Mhm.
I had never stopped thinking about him. And then I got divorced, and it was the strangest thing. I went, and I had always been like checking checking out his MySpace page. Like, this is how long this goes back. It's been 16 years now since we
Wow.
first met, but it took 6 years until we got to go
Mhm.
on our first official date. So it started off as like just checking his MySpace occasionally. And
Mhm.
then Facebook came along. So checking the Facebook. So my divorce was almost final. Like I think it was like within a couple of days of the papers being finalized. And I went and I checked on his Facebook page, and his relationship status said it's complicated. And I was like, what
Mm.
do you mean it's complicated? Like, did something change finally, like after all of these years?
Mhm.
Because I always knew he was the one. So I went and I clicked on the message button because I wanted to send him something like, hey, what's this? Up pops a message from him because I didn't know, like 2 months before that, he sent me a message letting me know that they were officially getting divorced and just wanted to see,
Mm.
how you doing?
Yeah.
Because he had
Wow.
never stopped thinking of me either.
When you think about your sense of self throughout all of this, because it just seemed
Mhm.
like you were either saving somebody or waiting for someone to save you,
Mm, yeah.
which is that parent child or victim savior, victim villain,
Hmm.
mentality. It's almost like you were always at one extreme or the other.
Hmm.
But true adulting is like in the middle where you show
Hmm.
up fully like 100% adult in every area of your life, no matter what other people are doing.
Yeah.
Where would you say your sense of self was? Like in your second marriage, in your first marriage, like
Oh
when you
my
thought about
gosh.
yourself, what came to your mind?
It My sense of self all the way up until my mid 40s was that I was always here to help other people.
Mm.
That was my only purpose. Like, any thoughts about myself and taking care of myself was selfish.
Mm.
Like, it was almost like a sin, even though I'm
Yeah.
not totally religious, but I was brought up by people that were.
So
Uh,
you're saying you didn't value yourself because that would make
I
that would
wasn't allowed to.
yeah, because that's what happens, and then it's sort of like we let ourselves get into these situations where we're not valued because
Mhm.
even if we say it or we appear confident or you're like getting things done, deep down you don't value yourself enough to not be in those situations.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was okay to even think that I could have any time for me or
Mhm.
allow people to help me or any of that.
Or allow
So,
people to take care of their own selves when their back got
yeah,
hurt.
that's their
It's
job to
their
heal
job.
themselves. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, no, things didn't start shifting for me until, I guess it's been about 5 years ago now. So my husband and I have been together for 10 years now. The
Mhm.
first 5 years, it was still this out of balance thing of me trying to help heal him from a lot of stuff.
Mm,
5 years ago, I had what I call my white light moment, where I was helping everybody at work. I was helping everybody at home,
mm,
and there was nothing left for me. Like nobody was helping me. I was giving
yeah.
everything in enormous quantities that I wanted to end my life. And I was driving home from work and I just kept seeing all these telephone poles. And I was
Mm,
fighting the urge to run into the telephone poles because it was like a 2-lane highway and I could have run into another car to end everything, end my suffering. But I was like, I don't want to hurt anybody. I just want
in
my
that
suffering to
moment,
end.
yeah, yeah, in that moment, you were still concerned for other people.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't want to
That's
hurt
how
anybody.
deep people pleasing and codependency can
Yeah.
go. People think it's like a benign thing and it's not a big deal, and
Hmm.
then, well, maybe recovery is needed and maybe not, and if everybody else would change, but it can really get to that place where you're ready to end it all.
Yeah. And so it was at that time, like I was doing a lot of praying
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, please, like something, I have to see something. And that's when I learned about the life coaching industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started to pick up the is it Townsend and Cloud books on
Yes,
boundaries.
yes, bound. Well, that's just the title. John Townsend and Henry Cloud. That's what it
That's
is.
it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those books, it gave me permission. It was so amazing.
Mm,
They're very religious, which at first was like a turnoff for me. But it said that God didn't put you on the earth just to help other people. That yes, you're supposed to
mm.
help other people, but not at the sake of yourself.
Not to your own detriment. Not to when
Yeah.
you're hurting yourself. It's sort of like, then the way I like to put it is, your first job is to put on your own mask, and that it
Hmm.
helps others when you take care of yourself. So if I have a job and I'm paying my own bills, and then I'm not a burden on the people
Hmm.
around me. If I'm
Yeah.
healthy and I take care of
Hmm.
my body and I go to the gym or have me time like you were taking, and have my
Hmm.
mental health in order, then nobody around me has to like take me to the hospital or spend their
Exactly.
money on
Well,
my treatments.
and I had some of those wounds to heal where there was a time I was taking those me nights and my kids got hurt as a result.
Mm,
So I
yeah.
was like, no, I don't want to do that. So, but I was with a different man,
Yeah.
not going to hurt my kids.
Yeah.
But it was having that permission where it was like, no, it's you take care of others and you take care of yourself. And
I
then
like
at
to
the
say the
time,
other way. You take care of yourself
yes,
and you take care of others.
yes. And that's where I saw a YouTube clip from Lisa Nichols, and you and I've talked
Mm,
about her.
yes. So
I want to
good.
hug her someday and just let her know how much she saved my life. She was talking about having your cup, and that
Mm,
only when you've filled your own cup and it's spilling over do you have that extra to
yes.
give to other people. What was
Yes.
happening was that I had all of my energy in my cup, but I was giving it to everybody else and I had nothing left in my cup for
Mm-hmm.
me. And it got to that critical point. It was like my own life force was completely gone because I gave it to everybody
Mm,
else. So then
wow.
when she said, no, fill that up and use that for you first. And then
Mm-hmm.
what spills over, that's what you give to others. And it's like that visual really put it into perspective. And then having the permission from these boundary books, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
help yourself and others.
Others. Yeah. What I love about your story is that you weren't perfectly healed from all the stuff in the past before you met a good
Hmm.
guy.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of times we want to be like, well, I'm healing. I'm going to take more time to heal. And, in my program, I do have, healing elements in the program. I work
Hmm.
with women from sort of like the after divorce period, the healing, the dating. And so a lot of women who do want to date will be like, well, I can't date now. And then the healing just goes on forever. And the
Hmm.
healing becomes a shield that keeps them safe because they're afraid to try again. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, listen, when you're dating, the work you need to do is going to show up. And then you
Hmm.
do that work.
Oh my
Like you
gosh.
can't,
Truer statement couldn't have been
right? You're
said.
not going to know where your triggers are if you're not putting yourself in a position to see some
Hmm.
triggers.
Yeah.
And
Very true.
you actually displayed that, when you were able to meet a good guy, you married
Hmm.
him. You were five
Hmm.
years into the marriage before Well, I think the work probably showed up a little bit earlier, but
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you
But I
saw
was
it
like, no,
5 years
no,
in.
no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And the thing is with us being soulmates, that strong magnetic attraction, it is so incredibly strong that I knew that I can heal and still he'll want to be with me. And
Yeah.
he has healing to do. So it's interesting, as I started my healing journey, eventually he started his healing journey because he saw me role modeling it. And he
Yes.
started hearing,
Yes.
I was being courageously vulnerable with him, which was hard for me because I was always the strong person, of
Mhm.
saying when I was emotionally fragile and the things that, excuse me, and the things that I was healing from and the mechanisms that I was going through. And a lot of it is mindset of, oh, here's how I thought about something. Here's where that thought or that belief even came from. Here's how I'm choosing to rewire my brain for my own healing. Like this might have been something I
Mm.
really, really believe there might be evidence for it, but there's also evidence of this other way of thinking about it where now I don't hurt and I'm not codependent and I'm not
Yes.
seeking out, dangerous relationships at work or with friends or family or, any of that. That now it's like, no, I want to be with other people that are either on a healing journey or that they're
Mhm.
already healed and I can learn from them.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and a lot of women are often afraid to set boundaries or make changes within
Mm-hmm.
their relationships, whether romantic relationships or family relationships. I have some clients that I work with on their relationships with siblings and parents. And I know sometimes people are, when they realize, like you did, that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pouring
Oh
from an
yeah.
empty cup, they're reluctant to make those changes because they think they're going to lose those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth that you're, an example of is that a good person will be willing
Yep.
to make those adjustments with you because they have a growth mindset as well. They want
Exactly.
something healthy.
Or they may not quite be there yet. And at first, like as you're changing your personality, because that's basically what I was doing, is changing my
Mm-hmm.
personality and not being a people pleaser as much. They don't like that change. And they get
Mm-hmm.
a little angry at first because I've gone through my change journey. Like I love to talk about the Kubler-Ross change curve and all of the
Mm-hmm.
things. Well, the thing is that I might already be experimenting with like my new change, my new identity. It has now triggered them to start a change curve. And the very first
Oh,
thing, they go
there.
from denial to
Mm,
anger. But when we
mm,
recognize that, oh, they're going to go through it, like, hey, who moved my cheese? This is what I'm used to. This isn't the person I married, or this isn't my sister or my daughter or my employee
mm-hmm.
anymore. And they get angry, that we can just welcome that because we know that this is part of their change curve and their journey. And it doesn't have to scare us back to being the person we
Mm-hmm.
used to be,
Oh,
that
that's
we just
brilliant.
patiently nurture them through the rest of their change curve. So then we both evolve.
That's incredible. You have just inspired me to like recognize the next best version of myself
Mm-hmm.
who looks
Mm-hmm.
at things. Oh my goodness, that's gold right there. That's gold right there, because we think we're changing and we're doing the things, and then we're looking at other people's responses and like, oh yeah, they're a hater and they're this, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh no, they're just at the beginning of the curve.
And they'll go from the anger to the anxiety, arguing with reality that
Mm-hmm.
like she shouldn't be like this. And then they
Mm-hmm.
get to the depression of, oh my gosh, she's going to be like this. I'm not good enough. I should leave. Oh, we're going to get divorced, or, she's going to quit her job or whatever. And then eventually they realize, oh wait, no, this is really who she is. And I can evolve and be part of her world. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I actually do want that. And then they start experimenting and stepping up to the plate and trying different things so that that everybody could live in harmony together. And it's
Yeah.
it's healthy for everybody.
That is so, so good. That's so good. So you and your current husband have been married 10 years now?
Well, we've been together for 10
Together
years
10
and
years.
we're celebrating our 8-year anniversary in July. And
Congratulations.
we actually moved out to the location where he proposed to me. So it's like a full circle moment when we moved out here. So all the
Well, and tell,
jingles.
tell the listeners when you say we moved out here, because I've been a long
Yeah.
time, I've been a long time admirer of where you live. Like
Oh, thank you.
you guys live by the beach.
Yes, yes. So we used to live in the Vacaville area and it was like 110 degrees and hot and the and
Mm-hmm.
different circumstances there were challenging to our mental health, but the heat was a big part of it.
Mhm.
So coming out to the ocean was always a way to like decharge a lot of the stress, to feel a lot better. It was good for our mental health.
Mhm.
So when we were at a pretty critical part for both of us for other circumstances, it wasn't our marriage, it was other stuff. We came out to the Mendocino coast and
Mm.
specifically a little town called Gualala. And oh my gosh, it was like the depression lifted for both of us. And I knew that we needed to live out here. So we just started like, just like, wouldn't it be something? And then we came back like 2 weeks later. And it was a 4-hour drive for us up Highway 1. And we really started talking about it on that second trip. And then we went driving, like just exploring, and we came to the Gualala Arts Center. And it is this beautiful facility set in the middle of a redwood forest. And I started crying because years prior to that, I wrote out a drawing of a retreat center I wanted to build someday. Because all of the
Mm.
healing that I had done, I wanted to provide to other people and bring in different healers because I do business process and mindset,
Mhm.
but there's so many other types of modalities for healing. When I was there at this retreat center, I saw it all the way down
Wow.
to there was one point that my husband started to walk down a trail and I didn't even look. And I said, keep walking, you're going to see water. And so he went walking a little bit further. He goes, oh, yeah, the river's right here. And he comes back. He goes, how did you know that? I said, because it was in my drawing. And like
Oh,
everything in
goodness.
my drawing was there. And I knew this was where we were supposed to be. And it was like this calling where it was like, I wanted to create wellness retreats for people. And we knew that not only was this a healing center in the world, we needed to be there for our own healing, for our own mental
Mhm.
health, but we also needed to be like that vortex, bringing people in for this massive amount of healing. So
I love it.
we, yeah, we bought a house overlooking the ocean and we quit our jobs. It was like the craziest thing ever. But I was like, I'm going to just start my own business. I'd been a business coach for over 10 years in biotech. And I was like, I think I can create all this plus all of the mindset coaching that I had been training on, that I was
Mhm.
incorporating there. I could bring it here. And I was helping people with their businesses, but also their mental health. And I
Mm.
was like, I'm going to go all in on my business so that we can get this up and going so we can have these wellness retreats here.
Yeah.
So we're
That's
in the
so
Mendocino coast.
exciting. I'm in. Send me an
Yeah.
invite as soon as you
Woohoo!
get the wellness retreat going.
Oh,
It
I
sounds
am in
beautiful.
retreat training this week, learning how to put on amazing experiential healing retreats.
Oh, how fun. Wow, what a journey. I mean, that's your very next step in this amazing journey of,
Mhm.
healing and growth and, pain. You went through a lot of pain. I know we didn't go super deep
Mhm.
into everything, but having been through my own divorce and toxic relationship, it's like I can tell that there's a lot of stories in between your stories. So I just really wanted to thank
Mhm.
you for coming on and sharing your story and sharing your journey and your advice. Speaking of, if you were to tell women who are currently dating, like just from
Mhm.
everything you've learned from this journey, what would
Mhm.
be your one or two pieces of advice for anyone who's divorced and dating right now?
One of my favorite things that I did from my experiment of dating 18 different men is I would write down a list after like every date of everything that I liked about the person or I liked about that connection between us. And then everything that I didn't. What did I not
Mm.
like about him? What did I not like about myself when I was with that person?
Mm-hmm.
And then I combined the list of here's all of my likes. I ended up with like a set of 104 things of my ideal
Mm.
mate. And then I had a list of all of the things that I didn't like. And then I decided what would be deal breakers and then what would be things I would be willing to work on together or, that compromise part. But
Mm-hmm.
having that list, it, it was gold because then it's like anytime I would date someone else, I kind of look back and it was something that would keep me from getting swept up in all of the emotions and the romance and my head going, oh yeah, of course I'm going to
Yeah.
ignore all the red flags. And of course he fits these things. No, go back and actually look at your
Yes.
list. And it's like a logical thing just to make sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot.
Right. Yeah, because it engages that prefrontal cortex, the
Mhm.
part of our brain that actually thinks logically and doesn't get swept up in anxiety or infatuation of the romance. It's actually
Yeah,
thinking about the long-term health of a relationship. And it,
exactly.
especially doing it afterwards and doing
Mm.
it frequently keeps you in that mode. That's
Yep.
excellent, excellent
Yep.
advice. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank
Please
you.
tell the listeners where they can find you if they want to work with you in their businesses or in mindset. Give us a couple of your internet handles or social media handles where they can find you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my website is My Freedom Grove. So Grove is Grove. So it's like the redwood trees and them forming a grove of them. I have a podcast there, My Freedom Grove podcast. And so it covers all sorts of mental health and business stuff, as well as like conflict and relationships and all of the mindset stuff so that you have healthy relationships.
Mm.
And I can be found on Facebook primarily. And I love having new friend requests. So if you just search for Gretchen Hernandez, you'll see my cover photo is me walking in the ocean. So you'll know you found the right one. My Facebook business page is My Freedom Grove dash business and mindset coaching. If you just go for My Freedom Grove business page, that's my old one. It got hacked. So you'll see like an Asian lady's picture. That's not the one you want to go to. You want to go to the one that has my picture.
Yeah, and
And then
we'll link the right one up in the show notes.
perfect. Yeah. So Facebook is really the best one to find me at. I'm also on Instagram at Gretchen_My Freedom Grove and on LinkedIn at Gretchen Hernandez.
Awesome. Gretchen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. I love your story. I appreciate you sharing so vulnerably. And everyone, check out the show notes, check out all of Gretchen's links and follow her on social media. We're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you, Gretchen, for your time.
Thank you, Sade, so much.
Welcome. And thank you, listeners, for your time and attention today. And I will see you next time.